Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Bitter Pill. I'm going to go ahead and start tonight. And while I'm waiting for people to come in, I'm going to play a clip from the contentious meeting between Vladimir Zelensky, president of Ukraine, and Trump and J.D. Vance in the Oval Office, which... as we'll talk about, evoked all kinds of outraged reactions from Bernie Sanders and many other, basically all the Democrats, and it was kind of hilarious. So, as was the meeting. So, without further ado, let's have a look at this disaster of a meeting, or delicious meeting, depending on how you want to look at it. Let's see.
That's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yeah, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine? Did you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Come once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
I'm not telling you.
Because you're in no position to dictate that.
Remember
this.
that.
You're in no position to dictate what we're going to feel. We're going to feel very good.
Feel influence.
We're going to feel very good and very strong.
You will feel influence.
You're right now not in a very good position. You've allowed yourself to be in a very bad position, and he happens to be right about it.
From the very beginning of the war.
You're not in a good position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having cards.
Playing cards.
Right now, you don't. You're playing cards. You're playing cards. You're gambling with the lives of millions of people. You're gambling with World War III. You're gambling with World War III. And what you're doing is very disrespectful to the country, this country. That's back to you. Far more than a lot of people said they should have.
Have you said thank you once this entire meeting? No, in this entire meeting, have you said thank you? You went to Pennsylvania and campaigned for the opposition in October. Offer some words of appreciation for the United States of America and the president who's trying to save your country.
Please, you think that if you will speak very loudly about the war,
He's not speaking loudly. He's not speaking loudly. Your country is in big trouble.
Can I
Wait a minute. No. You've done a lot of talking. Your country is in big trouble.
I know.
You're not winning. You're not winning this. You have a damn good chance of coming out okay because of us.
Mr. President, we are staying in our country, staying strong from the very beginning of the war. We've been alone, and we are thankful. I said thanks.
You haven't been
in this
alone.
Cabinet.
You haven't been alone.
In this cabinet.
We gave you through this stupid president $350 billion. We gave you military equipment, and your men are brave, but they had to use our military.
What about
if you didn't have our military equipment,
if
you didn't have our military equipment, this war would have been over in 2 weeks.
In 3 days. I heard it from Putin. In 3 days. This is something
maybe
new.
Less.
In 2 weeks. Of course, yes.
It's going to be a very hard thing to do business like this. I tell you.
Say thank you.
I said a lot of
except that there are disagreements, and let's go litigate those disagreements rather than trying to fight it out in the American media when you're wrong. We know that you're wrong.
But you see, I think it's good for the American people to see what's going on over there. I think it's very important. That's why I kept this going so long. You have to be thankful. You don't have the cards.
Thankful.
You're buried there. Your People are dying.
You're
again, running low on soldiers. Listen, you're running
Mr.
low
President.
on soldiers. It would be a damn good thing. And then you tell us, I don't want a ceasefire. I don't want a ceasefire. I want to go and I want this. Look, if you could get a ceasefire right now, I tell you, you take it so the bullets stop flying and your men stop getting killed.
Of course, we want to stop the war.
But you're saying you don't want a ceasefire.
But I said to you,
I want a ceasefire.
with guarantees.
Because you'll get a ceasefire faster than an agreement.
Ask our people about ceasefire, what they think.
That wasn't with me.
For you
that wasn't with me. That was with a guy named Biden, who was not a smart person. That was with Obama.
It was your president.
Excuse me. That was with Obama, who gave you sheets, and I gave you javelins.
Yes.
I gave you the javelins to take out all those tanks. Obama gave you sheets. In fact, the statement is Obama gave sheets and Trump gave javelins. You got to be more thankful, because let me tell you, you don't have the cards. With us, you have the cards. But without us, you don't have any cards.
One more question to Mr. Vice President. I'm sorry. Here.
It'll be a tough deal to make because the attitudes have to change.
What if Russia breaks ceasefire? What if Russia breaks peace talks? What do you do then? I understand that it's a heated conversation right now.
What are you saying?
She's asking, what if Russia breaks the ceasefire?
What if anything? What if a bomb drops on your head right now? Okay? What if they broke it? I don't know. They broke it with Biden because Biden, they didn't respect him. They didn't respect Obama. They respect me. Let me tell you, Putin went through a hell of a lot with me. He went through a phony witch hunt where they used him and Russia. You ever hear of that deal? That was a phony Hunter Biden, Joe Biden scam. Hillary Clinton, Shifty Adam Schiff. It was a Democrat scam. And he had to go through that. And he did go through it. We didn't end up in a war. And he went through it. He was accused of all that stuff. He had nothing to do with it. It came out of Hunter Biden's bathroom. It came out of Hunter Biden's bedroom. It was disgusting. And then they said, oh, the laptop from hell was made by Russia, the 51 agents. The whole thing was a scam. And he had to put up with that. He was being accused of all that stuff. All I can say is this. He might have broken deals with Obama and Bush, and he might have broken them with Biden. He did, maybe. Maybe he didn't. I don't know what happened. But he didn't break them with me. He wants to make a deal. I don't know if you can make a deal. The problem is I've empowered you to be a tough guy. And I don't think you'd be a tough guy without the United States. And your people are very brave. But you're either going to make a deal or we're out. And if we're out, you'll fight it out. I don't think it's going to be pretty, but you'll fight it out. But you don't have the cards. But once we sign that deal, you're in a much better position. But you're not acting at all thankful. And that's not a nice thing. I'll be honest, that's not a nice thing. All right. I think we've seen enough. What do you think? Huh? This is going to be great television. I will say that. All right. We'll see what we can do about putting it together.
Guys, come on, let's go.
Okay, well, kind of hilarious dressing down of Vladimir Zelensky there. Trump basically making the point, look, without our money and our weapons, you're nothing. You would have lost the war with Russia in a week or whatever. And you need to make a deal. And the deal he's talking about involves not just a peace agreement with Russia and into the hostilities, but also the deal involves Ukraine basically signing over the rights to a lot of its mineral resources to U.S. multinationals as a way of recouping the costs of U.S. funding to Ukraine. And really, of course, it's just a bonanza for U.S. mining companies. But in any case, what I wanted to talk about mainly tonight was the reactions of just the usual suspects who have been cheerleading this war from the very beginning. And chief among them was Mr. Bernie Sanders, Bomber Bernie, as a lot of us like to call him, who has this reputation as some sort of progressive. But really, if you look at his record, ever since he came into Congress in, I think it was 1990, he's just been a warmonger. He voted against the Iraq War. He's famous for doing that, but he also voted in favor of the bombing and sanctions of Iraq in the 1990s, and he voted for funding the U.S. occupation of Iraq after the initial phase of the war was over. And basically, he supported almost every other war. The only war that he hasn't supported since he's been in office has been the U.S. and Saudi led war in Yemen. But he was against that. But otherwise, he's just a typical this U.S. ruling class establishment warmonger. And so here's what Bernie Sanders had to say in the aftermath of Trump and J.D. Vance's meeting with Zelensky. Let's see. So Bernie says, Trump berates Zelensky, the leader of a democratic country courageously fighting Russian imperialism, while he allies himself with Putin, a dictator who started the bloodiest European war in 80 years. Sorry, President Trump, we believe in democracy, not authoritarianism. And then elsewhere, he said this. After years of Republicans talking about, quote, freedom, is there one Republican in Congress prepared to stand with Ukraine and democracy? Or do they all agree with Trump that Vladimir Putin, a bloodthirsty dictator, is our ally in this horrific war that he started? So a lot of people let him have it for these comments. So I said, wow, are there any fascists you don't love, Bernie? Ukrainian Nazis, Zionists, Navalny. Who else? Well, let's see. Here's what he said about Navalny, who was the Russian dissident who was imprisoned on corruption charges and died in jail. And morons like Bernie Sanders accused the Russian government of murdering Navalny. So Bernie says, Alexei Navalny courageously exposed the corruption and lies of Putin's authoritarian regime. Now Putin has killed him for it. The Russian people deserve better. Well, Bernie, Alexei Navalny was a fascist, very, very right-wing, and really not very popular political figure. So it's not as though he was some sort of major threat to the Russian government. And I've explored the details of all this in an episode a year ago, so I won't go into it now. But essentially, he was put in prison after being caught both, in I guess money laundering schemes, and also, he appeared to be on the payroll of the U.S. So he was in prison, died there of natural causes, as far as anybody knows. There's no evidence of anything else. But I mean, let's break down this claim of Bernie Sanders that Ukraine supporting Ukraine's proxy war with Russia somehow represents a fight for democracy, and Vladimir Putin is a bloodthirsty dictator, and Zelensky is a leader of a democratic country courageously fighting Russian imperialism. And Putin is a dictator, but Zelensky is a leader of a democratic country. Well, let's review some history here, Mr. Sanders. What is the nature of the Ukrainian government, and how did the Ukrainian government come to be? Well, in 2014, there was a coup in Ukraine, backed by the United States and led by, primarily led by neo-Nazis in Ukraine. There are lots of them. There's a picture of the Azov battalion proudly posing with a Nazi flag as well as their own fascist flag. Ukraine has been politically dominated at least since the 2014 coup by groups like this. They have a great deal of power within the military and within the security apparatus. Both the president who served initially after the 2014 coup and the one who was elected in, I believe it was May of 2014, were allies with folks like this, and basically their policy preferences held sway. So from 2014 on, the Ukrainian government was basically at war with, to an extent, its Jewish population, as you might expect, although they certainly welcomed collaborators like Zelensky, who is of Jewish ethnicity, also, although he doesn't practice. But their main target was Russians. A lot of people don't know this, but one of the main ethnic groups that Nazis all the way back to Nazi Germany have had on their list of folks they hate is Russians, ethnic Russians. And so from 2014 onward, the Ukrainian government turned against its own Russian population, which is, I believe, about 30% of the population. They're by far the largest ethnic minority in Ukraine. Most of those folks were in the eastern parts of Ukraine, so the provinces of Donetsk and Luhansk, bordering Russia, and the province of Crimea, which, for most of its history had actually been part of Russia, and overwhelmingly had a ethnic Russian-speaking population, and Russia had a military base there. So, just lots of violence, of course, ensuing from the coup. A lot of people in Ukraine, particularly the Russian population, did not accept this coup government. So there was just violence in many places. Odessa, the neo-Nazis attacked some trade unionists, burned down a building that they were in. I think it was their headquarters, and killed several dozen. And this prompted a major secessionist movement in these three provinces. Actually, and I talked about this in detail in my Substack article about the Ukraine war that I wrote in that I put out in May of 2022. But Crimea had actually tried to break away from Ukraine a number of times before 2014. Back in the 1990s, they did. And so in very short order, I think it was by April, I'd have to go back and check, residents of Crimea voted overwhelmingly, something like 96 or 7%, to secede from Ukraine and become part of Russia. Excuse me. So weirdest cold I've had. I got it like 3 weeks ago, and then it went away after about a week, and then it kind of came back. So I don't know what the hell's going on, but pardon me for that. But anyway, so Russia obviously considered Crimea to be part of Russia anyway, and wanted the Sevastopol naval base to remain with Russia, which seemed a little iffy with the coup government that was so hostile to Russia and to Russians. And so Crimea immediately became part of Russia. Donetsk and Luhansk voted to, the citizens there held a referendum and voted to secede from Ukraine in 2014, declared their independence, and that prompted a civil war where over the course of the next 8 years, between Ukrainian troops and militias in Donetsk and Luhansk and civilians, about 14,000 people died, and there were many other things that the Ukrainian government did besides just flat out killing a lot of innocent people to make life difficult for the Russian-speaking population. So in several contexts, such as in government publications and in any context involving government business and the publication of books, in terms of the languages that were taught in schools, Russian was just banned, the Russian language. And so Russians, ethnic Russians didn't feel welcome in Ukraine, and that led to Eastern Ukraine deciding they didn't want to be part of Ukraine anymore, and that prompted this civil war. So this is the background that people like Bernie Sanders will never tell you about. And what Russian imperialism is he talking about? Where's Russia's empire? What countries does Russia control? Over the last during this century, Russia has intervened militarily in Ukraine. They intervened militarily in Syria at the request of the Syrian government. Their intervention in Ukraine was at the request of those eastern Ukrainian provinces that I spoke about, because Ukrainian troops were prepared to launch a full-scale invasion of Donetsk and Luhansk, the Donbass region of Ukraine, in late February of 2022. So, Russian intelligence found out about this, and so Russia beat them to the punch and launched their invasion before the Ukrainian government launched their invasion of eastern Ukraine. So that's what actually happened. Now, as for Bernie's claim that excuse me, I don't know how long I'm going to be able to keep doing this if this keeps up, but I'll try. As for the claim that Putin is a dictator, I mean, he's the elected president of Russia. Opinion polls repeatedly show Putin being very popular. Russia holds presidential elections on a regular basis. Putin was not the president between 2008 and 2012. So he hasn't been continuously the president this century. Russia has a functioning parliament. They have a full complement of political parties, including the Communist Party that used to govern, used to be the government back when the Soviet Union existed. That's still around. No banning, no censorship. Certainly, I wouldn't say there's no political repression in Russia, but this idea that Putin is a dictator is just ludicrous. Now, as for Zelensky, well, let's hear what Tulsi Gabbard has to say. And I have many problems with Tulsi Gabbard's politics, principally her support for Israel, as I've talked about on this show before. But on Ukraine, in my opinion, her position is rock solid. So here's a couple of clips of things she's had to say about, excuse me, about whether Ukraine is some sort of democracy. Sorry, I messed up here. Here we go. So she says, Zelensky now has absolute control of Ukrainian media. This was in 2023 when she wrote this. Outlawed opposition political parties in Ukraine's Orthodox Church, Russian Orthodox Church specifically, declared martial law and uses absolute power under martial law to cancel presidential elections. So much for Biden's false narrative that the world is in an existential fight to protect democracies from autocracies, wasting billions of U.S. tax dollars.
In Ukraine, President Zelensky has already taken complete control of the media. He has outlawed his political opposition parties, and he has banned the second largest Orthodox Christian church. That wasn't enough. Now, in his latest edict, he declared that he's canceling the presidential elections altogether. Were planned for March. When you look back in history, even at the height of the Vietnam War, when there's fighting going on in every major city, South Vietnam still held elections. During my first deployment to Iraq, it was 2005. It was the height of that war. And there was great threat of violence for anyone who dared to go out and vote. Yet Iraq still held its democratic elections and people still turned out to vote. Now, President Biden claims his mission is to defend democracies and defeat autocracies. But he continues to take money out of our pockets to underwrite a war of one corrupt autocracy, Ukraine, against another, Russia. So the real reason Zelensky has outlawed elections is to stop any who dare to criticize the rampant corruption in Ukraine or the war. Those in our government who support him must also therefore believe that when the United States is at war, they too will be justified in canceling our elections.
So yeah, great point. I mean, I don't fully agree with her perception of the Russian government, although it is true. There's authoritarianism there and so forth. But they do have elections. They do have basic representative democracy as is typical of capitalist countries. But she makes a great point that many other countries have held elections during wartime. The United States held elections, as normal during World War II. There were presidential elections in 1940 and 1944, as well as congressional elections throughout that war. So this idea that, well, Ukraine's at war, they can't have elections because they're at war is just ridiculous. Excuse me. In fact, in eastern Ukraine and 4 provinces where the fighting was going on and where the sentiment to basically be done with being a part of Ukraine spread to 2 other provinces, Kherson and Zaporizhia. Citizens there did vote during the war in September of 2022 to God damn it. Sorry. To secede from Ukraine and join Russia. This was a second vote to that effect this was a second vote for independence for Donetsk and Luhansk, but this time they also voted explicitly to become part of Russia. So yeah, you can hold elections during wartime. Many countries have done it. Okay, is this a different one or the same one? No, same one. Okay.
Propaganda media don't want you to know. Ukraine's President Zelensky has just banned yet another political opposition party, one that questioned his legitimacy as president, and used Ukraine's Department of Justice to mandate the seizure of this party's members' assets. Now, this is just the latest of Zelensky's actions to do this sort of thing. He began banning major political opposition parties in 2022, when he also started banning TV channels that were associated with his political opponents. And he took over total control of Ukraine's largest television networks, now controlled by their government. Zelensky's presidential term ended on May 20th. He canceled elections in the name of martial law, suspending Ukraine's constitution so that he could stay in power. Now, defenders of Zelensky will say, hey, Ukraine is in the middle of a war. They can't have elections. Just stop for a moment and think, if we accept that excuse or criteria for suspending the Constitution and canceling elections, then we should presume that leaders in our own country and our own establishment media will also use this same excuse and rationale when they suspend our Constitution and our elections, since we too are at war with Russia and China. If you think this sounds crazy, look at what's already going on. They've already started conditioning us to accept a dictatorship by rationalizing their own use of our Department of Justice to target President Trump and other political enemies in their efforts to stay in power.
Okay, I see I have a few comments that I haven't responded to because I wasn't looking at them. So let me just put them up and respond to them. Blackbird Blues asks, what do you have against Bernie? And several other comments to that effect. Well, as I said, the main thing I have against Bernie, not the only thing, but, because, he basically, claimed to be in favor of all these progressive policies, Medicare for all, and so on and so forth. Didn't fight for any of them. He let the Democrats steal the election from him in 2016 as well as 2020. Well, explicitly stole it in 2016, and he basically rigged it so that he no longer had a fair chance in 2020 by having all the candidates except Biden drop out, and Tulsi Gabbard, who wouldn't join the scam. Excuse me, drop out and endorse Biden. But also, he's just been, as I said earlier, a warmonger from the moment he set foot in Congress in 1990. I highly recommend this article from Left Voice that does a detailed look at Bernie Sanders' foreign policy record. And it's just one case after another of Bernie supporting almost every single U.S. military intervention in the last, now it's been 3 decades. So, he voted for the so-called Iraq Liberation Act in 1998, which authorized Bill Clinton to bomb Iraq and sanction them. And as presumably, the U.S. sanctions against Iraq were so severe that it was estimated that 500,000 children, they say, died as a result of the sanctions. There was no clean water. Waterborne diseases were rampant. Food was short, and so on and so forth. The policies that Bernie Sanders supported, Bill Clinton's policies in the 1990s against Iraq, devastated Iraq. Sanders then went on to vote for the bombing of Yugoslavia that killed several thousand people in 1999. He voted, as did everybody except for one congressperson, Barbara Lee. They all voted, other than Lee, for the war in Afghanistan. Bernie did vote against the war in Iraq initially in 2002, the vote on authorizing military force in Iraq, but then proceeded to repeatedly vote to fund the U.S. military occupation of Iraq. Sanders supported the NATO bombing and proxy war against Libya that overthrew and killed Muammar Gaddafi. He supported the war in Syria that devastated Syria with war and sanctions and stealing Syria's oil and so on and so forth, until finally, just recently, one of the groups of terrorists that the U.S. and its allies were backing in Syria was able to overthrow the Syrian government and have done what everybody who knows who Al Qaeda and the like are expected them to do. They've gone on a rampage of killing and torture and so on and so forth. Bernie Sanders supported the sanctions and efforts to overthrow the government of Venezuela. I guess he did speak out against the coup in Bolivia, but that's kind of an exception to the rule. And of course, he has been a gung-ho supporter of the Ukraine war, as have all of the other Democrats. Bernie pretends not to be a Democrat. He claims that he's an independent when he's not running for president, but he's not an independent. He's a Democrat. And it took Bernie several months before he was willing to say that there should be a ceasefire in Gaza, and he never called what Israel was doing a genocide. And he's always been very pro-Israel in his framing of that conflict. He had a town hall meeting in 2014 in Vermont, where he's one of the senators, where basically he got into an argument with his constituents because he was so much more pro-Israel than they were, basically. He's often voted in favor of the bloated U.S. military budget, and on and on. Okay, so I hope that answers that question. What do I have against Bernie? Okay, next comment by Blackbird Blues. Ukraine is not Zionist or Nazi. What drugs are you on? Well, you don't know what you're talking about, dude. First of all, First of all, Israel is at close allies with Ukraine and vice versa. Israel has, in fact, been one of the many countries that have sent weapons to Ukraine, including directly to the neo-Nazis. And you might think, well, gosh, I can't imagine Jews supporting Nazis. Well, Zionists are not ordinary Jews. This is a far-right, not even religious, really, but more of a political cult, an ethno-nationalist, racist cult. And so they actually have a lot in common with Nazis and other fascists. Israel, in fact, was close allies with apartheid South Africa. But anyway, Ukraine, has a gigantic Nazi population. Compared to most countries, not Nazis and their ilk hold a lot more power in Ukraine than they do in most countries. And this dates back all the way to World War II. Ukraine was, of course, part of the Soviet Union at that time, but the Soviet Union had not been able to get rid of ethnic nationalists, Nazis, actually, literally, in Western Ukraine. And they were very active during World War II. They collaborated with the German Nazis to commit actually the largest massacre of Jews of the entire Holocaust. Something like over 1 million Jews were killed in Ukraine during the Holocaust, as well as lots of Poles and, of course, Russians and others. And after World War II, the U.S. backed these very same Nazis, just as they are doing now. And so yeah, Ukraine does have a sizable Nazi influence, and they are also, their government anyway, is Zionist. Now, I'm talking about the people in positions of power in Ukraine. I'm not talking about the population in general, but I'm talking about people like Zelensky, who's very much a Zionist, very supportive of Israel, and others in the Ukraine government who are out and out open Nazis. This is not something that anybody can really deny. And prior to the outbreak of the Russia-Ukraine war in February 2022, the Western media actually talked about Ukraine's Nazi problem quite a lot. Let's see. Maybe I can find this collage of stories about Nazis in Ukraine. Okay, how do I get to that? Let's see. To stop this. Oh, I can't. Not sure if I can do it. Okay, it's taking me too long to figure it out. But anyway, I've got a slide with headlines of a couple of dozen stories in the Western media prior to 2022 about Ukraine's very severe issue with with Nazis. And Ukraine celebrates the birthday every year of Stefan Bandera, who was the leader of the Ukrainian Nazi groups in the 1940s and 50s. They have monuments and statues to Nazis all over Ukraine. There are high-ranking Ukrainian military officials who have portraits of Nazis on their wall. You see, Ukrainian troops or security personnel with Nazi patches on their shoulders and so forth. This is a well-known problem. Okay, all right. This dude, Blackbird Blues, is just kind of off his rocker, so I'm gonna just ban this user. Anyway, where the hell can I get rid of it? So Keister Bunny said, Blackbird, do some research into the Azov Battalion before you spout about the Ukrainian stance on Nazis. One of our own journalists, Coach Red Pill, lost his life trying to leave Ukraine after speaking out against the authoritarianism. Rest in peace. Well, Keister Bunny there is referring to Gonzalo Lira, who was American, Chilean-American journalist who was just happened to be living in Ukraine. He wasn't necessarily going there to report on anything, but well, actually, I guess he was a businessman, but took up journalism. But anyway, he just happened to be in Ukraine when the war broke out, and he was kind of stuck in Kharkov, and he spoke out against the Ukrainian government, and so despite his being an American citizen, he was arrested, tortured, and eventually he tried to flee Ukraine. He was killed in the process, and Ukraine has assassinated quite a few other people. They have a kill list that Americans are on, such as journalist and former UN weapons inspector Scott Ritter, and several others that some of the people who watch this channel are familiar with. Probably not Blackbird Blues, who apparently stumbled on this channel by accident, not knowing that I'm a socialist who's against U.S. imperialism. Anyway, well, back to the topic. Let's see. Was there anything else I want to say? Well, just that there were so many other folks who, among Democrats and among politicians around the world who were basically spouting the same line. Oh, Ukraine is a democracy. Russia's a dictatorship. How dare Trump not continue to support Ukraine? Meaning, keep giving weapons to Ukraine in a hopeless battle. A battle where hopelessly outmatched against the world's most powerful conventional military, the Russian military, where Ukraine's already lost 1 million men, and men are getting kidnapped off the street and sent to the front lines constantly. That was even brought up in the meeting between Zelensky and Trump and Vance. Vance brought it up. So anyway, there were just so many others who. Oh, I forgot to mention. Somebody pointed out that. Okay, where the hell? Here we go. Somebody pointed out that Bernie Sanders is talking like he's so pro-democracy, and Republicans are bad fascists who are against democracy and are in bed with Russia, blah blah blah. Somebody reminded Bernie, hey, you voted for Marco Rubio for Secretary of State, Trump's Secretary of State. Bernie and all the other senators voted for Marco Rubio, unanimously picked to be Trump's Secretary of State. And Rubio is certainly one of the worst picks for Trump for his administration. Despite her awful stance on Israel, Tulsi Gabbard was one of his better picks, and Bernie Sanders voted against her, even though she has been a very outspoken critic of the Ukraine war and of many other U.S. wars. She was a big critic of the U.S. proxy war. U.S. troops were also there in Syria, the U.S. Regime change effort in Syria. She spoke out about the fabrications regarding Syrian government chemical weapons use, pointed out the evidence collected by the OPCW that the Syrian government did not do that. So she was arguably, and we're talking lesser evils here, of course. I've done lots of videos about what I don't like about Tulsi Gabbard, but she's certainly his least bad pick, I think, and has some good qualities. And Bernie voted against her because, despite his reputation as being some sort of progressive, Bernie is just at this point, it's pretty clear he's just an establishment Democrat. He never once criticized Joe Biden when Biden was president. He lied on his behalf, trying to conceal the fact that Biden likely has dementia. Right up until the very end, supported Biden's run for president from the moment he announced in April of 2023, all the way through the very day that Biden announced he was dropping out of the race. On that very day, earlier in the day, Bernie Sanders was like, rah, rah, Joe Biden, he's going to beat Trump. So Bernie's, he's just a clown. So moving around the world, the Prime Minister of Australia, who's been a proud supporter of Israel's genocide, says, for 3 years, Australia has proudly supported the brave people of Ukraine in their struggle to defend their sovereignty against the brutality of Russian aggression and in support of international law. Australia stands with Ukraine. So I pointed out a couple of things to this moron. So when the Ukrainian military was shelling civilians in eastern Ukraine for 8 years prior to Russia intervening, killing thousands of them, that was legal under international law. Gosh, who knew? And I also pointed out to him, as did a number of other people, that hey, you hypocrite, you're a supporter of Israel. You think they're not violating international law? They're committing a freaking genocide, and you are supporting them. And you could say the same about all the other hypocritical politicians who've spoken. So here's a politician from New Zealand. The New Zealand government must continue to stand with Ukraine. The values they are fighting for are Kiwis' values. We should continue to do all we can to support them. Time for our government to speak up. So what exactly are these values that he's talking about? Well, I speculated, well, maybe Kiwis support Nazism. And there's the collage of news articles that I was trying to show you earlier, actually. So you can see there just all kinds of stories about how the far right has an enormous amount of power and influence in Ukraine, that it's really kind of permeated their culture. And granted, the majority of Ukrainians don't identify with this ideology whatsoever, but certainly the government and military and security apparatus are very much in the grips of these kinds of people. But I think the good news is, well, let me see if I can actually find a couple more in tweets by politicians. Liz Cheney, generations of American patriots from our revolution onward have fought for the principles Zelensky is risking his life to defend. Blah, blah, blah. Eric Feigl, ding. He's an epidemiologist who, in my opinion anyway, did a pretty good job of trying to educate people about COVID and all of that, but his politics kind of suck. He's just an establishment liberal. Excuse me. Well, here's a shocker to you, I'm sure. Governor Tim Walz, Donald Trump is embarrassing the United States on the world stage. We are a country that stands up to dictators and fights for democracy. Oh, really, Tim? You and your colleagues support a dictator in Ukraine? You support, a fascist government in Israel? And you supply weapons to people who are massacring lots and lots of innocent people. Such clowns. Oh, well. This review of stupid politicians wouldn't be complete without looking at the comment from the head of state of our 51st state, Justin Trudeau. Russia illegally and unjustifiably invaded Ukraine. For 3 years now, Ukrainians have fought with courage and resilience. Their fight for democracy, freedom, and sovereignty is a fight that matters to us all. Canada will continue to stand with Ukraine and Ukrainians in achieving a just and lasting peace. Okay, well, first of all, Justin, Ukraine hasn't had sovereignty since 2014, when your buddies in the U.S., who you backed in doing so, arranged for the elected government of Ukraine to be overthrown. So I'm not sure what that has to do with democracy, freedom, or sovereignty. Ukraine was so sovereign that they had foreigners, Americans and people from neighboring countries and so on and so forth, being appointed to positions in the Ukrainian government right after the coup. And of course, Ukraine has just been the exact opposite of a bastion of democracy or freedom ever since. They've banned all opposition political parties. They've banned all opposition media. The only major media outlet that's allowed there is run by the government. They banned the Russian Orthodox Church. They've jailed their political opponents. Zelensky. This happened before the war started. Most of this, including on the part of Zelensky. So, a year before the war, Zelensky had his chief political rival arrested. He was tortured in prison. His party was banned. His media outlet was banned. So yeah, Ukraine has never been a democracy, which is something that you'll never hear from people like Justin Trudeau or Bernie Sanders or really any politician, other than people like Trump. Actually, Trump called Zelensky a dictator, and Trump is right. Not that Trump doesn't have authoritarian tendencies himself, but yeah, that's what Zelensky is. Okay, well, let's look at a few more comments here. Bernie is a Democrat shill who has submitted to his party's overlords essentially at every turn, despite his loud soapboxing on stage. Yep, I mean, he was all talk and no action when it came to fighting for a living wage. The Biden administration that used the ruse of, well, we can't do anything because of the parliamentarian to refuse to, cast a tie-breaking vote that could have given us a $15 minimum wage. Kamala Harris, had she voted, we would have a we would have a $15 minimum wage now. But the Biden administration refused. Bernie didn't say a damn word about it. Yeah, this is another good point by Keister Bunny. The Oval Office clash was groomed by a bunch of Obamaites who met with Zelensky ahead of time, and I don't know what you mean there, but basically they encouraged him to refuse to sign the mineral agreement that he had previously said he was going to sign. Yep, totally agree. So yeah, basically, I've made spent an hour making this point among others, but the basic point I wanted to get across is that despite all his shortcomings and his allies' shortcomings, Donald Trump is actually seeking peace in Ukraine, and on the other hand, people like Bernie Sanders and Justin Trudeau and Anthony Albanese and Keir Starmer in the UK and Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, and so forth. All the establishment liberals have turned into just absolute warmongers. Even in this case, there's nothing to be gained from this. The only people that are benefiting, in the Western ruling classes from continuing this losing effort in Ukraine. The war was doomed to Ukraine was doomed to lose the war right from the beginning, of course. The only people who are benefiting, even the ruling class of the United States and other Western countries, is weapons contractors. Who else is making money off of continuing this war? Nobody. It's just this completely irrational effort to try and destabilize Russia, which has, it was obvious it was going to fail within, a month or two of the war starting. And they just, they're so committed to this that they just can't give it up. And it's really unfortunate for the people of Ukraine, whose country has just been totally destroyed. Over 1 million men and a far smaller but not trivial number of women and children. Russia has lost, I think, something like 100,000 men. Almost twice as many as the U.S. lost in Vietnam. Weapons contractors are laughing all the way to the bank. Europe's economy is crumbling. So, it's just crazy how European political leaders are sabotaging their own economies to go after Russia. Russia is like Moby Dick to all these Captain Ahabs who run the majority of Western politics. So, in any case, I guess I will stop there and wish you a good night, and keep fighting for justice, man. I will see you later.